It looked like the WNBA saga, the little run that they had, is now over, as major networks could be pulling segments from the broadcast, and this current CBA agreement is heating up. This is all what the owners wanted.
The world of women's professional basketball is reeling from a seismic shockwave, a bombshell that threatens to shatter the very foundation the league has painstakingly built over decades.
Think about ESPN, Fox, other sports networks. Everybody has took away WNBA segments.
In a move that feels both sudden and brutally calculated, industry titans ESPN and Fox Sports are reportedly executing a significant retreat from their coverage of the WNBA.
Oh, the ratings go down. What happened when the ratings go down? They're back in a sunken place, bro. And guess what happens when they go back in a sunken place? They're not getting no big-time paydays.
The timing of this media blackout is nothing short of catastrophic, striking at the league's most vulnerable moment, the prolonged absence of Caitlin Clark. She is the generational phenom who, in a single season, ignited a firestorm of mainstream interest, single-handedly delivering the WNBA its most astronomical ratings spike in history.
Y'all ain't finna get no $1 million contracts. Guess what's gonna happen to that CBA agreement? It's gonna stay the same. You're not getting no extra money. The ratings has dropped 80%. That's what they're gonna say. You know, they're gonna be looking through this. Hey, you know what? The ratings are just, yeah, I'm sorry. So all of that momentum that you guys had about 1.5 years ago, oh, it's over. Oh, it's over.
Now, with Clark sidelined by a devastating injury, that brilliant spotlight has been extinguished almost overnight, plunging the league back into the shadows. What was triumphantly hailed as the dawn of a golden era for women's basketball now appears to be a fragile house of cards, collapsing under the immense weight of its own hype. The legions of new fans who flocked to witness Clark's electrifying, long-range artistry have seemingly vanished, prompting network executives to question if the Clark effect was ever a sustainable tide or merely a fleeting, person-dependent wave.
I'll say a little conspiracy with keeping Caitlin Clark out, with them playing a factor in her not being there to keep the CBA agreements and pull away the interest from the league. I believe this is a planned attack by the WNBA owners, commissioners, to pull the interest away from the league.
For a league perpetually wrestling with internal pay disputes, inconsistent ticket sales, and a constant barrage of public controversy, this strategic withdrawal by its biggest media partners feels like a potential death knell.
This has been a joke, and the WNBA has, in my view, blown its opportunity.
The most pressing question is no longer simply why ESPN and Fox backed away, but what this chilling exodus signifies for the very survival and future of the WNBA itself.
To get these set paydays that they garner and they want, bro. In order to do that, you have to have a consistent track record of good ratings, consistent track records of merchandise sales, ticket sales, and all of these things. And I'm telling you right now, next year is going to be a tough year.
When ESPN and Fox Sports made the quiet but resolute decision to curtail their WNBA coverage, it was far more than a simple adjustment to their programming schedules. It was a resounding statement written in the cold, unforgiving language of analytics. These are media empires built on a foundation of viewer metrics, advertiser appeal, and compelling storylines that can capture and hold the national conversation.
How many times have you watched WNBA games since Caitlin Clark got hurt? Now think about this. It led our show last summer.
A bunch.
Oh, I think I led with it 6 times. I led with the WNBA. And either way, I talk about what I think is interesting. You notice I didn't talk about it this year?
Yeah.
It's not because I suddenly disliked the league. I thought it was growing. Anybody that wants to argue this, you're off your rocker. Caitlin Clark is the league.
For the past year, Caitlin Clark was that storyline. Every dazzling no-look pass, every record-shattering three-pointer, every defiant press conference was a packaged moment of pure gold, drawing millions of eyes to a league that had for so long fought for a sliver of mainstream relevance. But the second she was carried off the court, her season prematurely ended. That propulsive momentum vanished into thin air. In boardrooms from Bristol to Los Angeles, the reassessment was swift and merciless. The harsh, unspoken truth of sports media is that networks operate not on sentiment or loyalty, but on quantifiable returns. When Clark was healthy, the numbers were undeniable. Ratings soared to unprecedented heights, merchandise flew off the shelves, and social media engagement exploded. Without her, those same metrics didn't just dip, they cratered, exposing a terrifying dependency. The Clark effect was proven to be devastatingly real, perhaps too real. Instead of her gravitational pull lifting the entire league into a new orbit, her presence inadvertently masked the fact that the WNBA had staked its entire resurgence on the shoulders of a single 23-year-old.
I don't know what the ratings are. I haven't read them, but I know last year with Caitlin Clark, I would, if the game was on, I would drive home making a point. And when's that game on?
I would watch it on my phone in the car. So you could listen, not watch, I'm driving, but you could listen to it in the car.
The fallout was immediate and painfully public. Fans who had grown accustomed to seeing WNBA highlights leading sports news segments noticed the silence first. Games that once trended nationally on X, formerly Twitter, now struggled to generate a local ripple. Primetime broadcast slots, once a symbol of the league's arrival, began to shrink, replaced by reruns or niche programming. Within ESPN, executives watched the viewership data flatline and knew the implication. Advertisers, who had paid premium prices to be associated with the Clark phenomenon, were not going to continue investing in games that couldn't hold an audience. Fox Sports, known for an even more ruthless approach to programming, reportedly arrived at the same conclusion with even greater speed. Their internal logic was simple. Why dedicate precious airtime and resources to a product that, without its singular star, could not command a mainstream audience? What makes this reversal sting with such venom is the stark contrast to the triumphant narrative of just last season. The media was saturated with articles heralding the WNBA's golden era. Heated debates about raising players' salaries to match their NBA counterparts dominated talk shows. Players, empowered by the newfound attention, were demanding the respect and the paychecks they felt they had finally earned. Now, all that defiant noise has been silenced by the deafening reality of a single injury. It is a cruel injustice to Clark, and it is a bitter pill for the hundreds of athletes who toiled in relative obscurity for decades before her. But the networks have spoken with their actions, and their message is clear. No Clark, no coverage. Inside the league's locker rooms, a simmering frustration has reportedly boiled over into outright anger. Players who were eager to prove that the game was bigger than one individual are now confronting the crushing reality of just how fragile their ecosystem is. League owners and executives can attempt to spin the narrative, but when the two most powerful sports networks in the country effectively pull their support, it sends an undeniable message that the hype train has not just slowed, but completely derailed. For a players' association fighting to renegotiate its CBA and leverage its perceived popularity into generational wealth, the timing is an unmitigated disaster. Yet, perhaps the most telling aspect of this saga is not just that ESPN and Fox retreated, but the sheer velocity with which they did it. Without hesitation, without a grace period, almost as if they were waiting for the first sign of weakness to justify an exit. This network retreat, however, was merely the catalyst. It opened the floodgates for a torrent of criticism, exposing the deep-seated issues that Clark's stardom had temporarily concealed and allowing the league's most vocal detractors to tear into its vulnerabilities with renewed ferocity. The storm had been brewing for months. Caitlin Clark's injury was simply the lightning strike that ignited the forest fire. The exodus of ESPN and Fox Sports didn't occur in a vacuum. It was the inevitable consequence of a league that had hitched its wagon to a single supernova star. To truly comprehend the speed of their departure, one must look at the data that drove the decision. With Clark's debut, the WNBA was riding an unprecedented tidal wave of popularity. Her collegiate stardom translated seamlessly into professional buzz, with ratings doubling, arenas selling out, and her jersey becoming the highest selling of any athlete in any sport. But as network analysts dug deeper, they unearthed a troubling trend. The surge was not a league-wide phenomenon. It was a Clark-specific one. National broadcasts featuring the Indiana Fever drew record numbers, while games between other teams, even those with established all-stars, saw only marginal increases. The moment Clark was injured, the statistical model collapsed. Games that had pulled respectable numbers plummeted to near-record lows. Local ticket sales, which had seen a boost from visiting fever games, stagnated. The compelling storylines that once dominated social media vanished from the algorithm. For the networks, this wasn't just a programming issue. It was a financial liability. Their entire WNBA strategy had been built around a single thread, and once that thread snapped, the entire product ceased to make financial sense. Behind the scenes, the controversy deepened. The networks didn't just trim their coverage, they performed a surgical amputation. Pre-game shows dedicated to the WNBA were the first to go. Highlight packages that once featured prominently on SportsCenter were condensed into brief, blink-and-you'll-miss-it segments. Talk show debates, which had previously thrived on the rivalries and drama surrounding Clark, were dropped from the rundown altogether. For the athletes who had fought so hard to elevate the league's profile, it was a brutal affirmation of their worst fears. Their platform was not yet strong enough to stand on its own. Critics argue the league itself engineered this dynamic. By channeling the vast majority of its marketing and promotional energy into Clark, the WNBA inadvertently made her both its savior and its single point of failure. While she elevated the league to new heights, she also exposed its fundamental lack of depth in terms of mainstream star power. Networks are in the business of profit, not patience. When the profits vanished, they didn't hesitate to cut their losses. Some insiders even whisper that ESPN and Fox had been privately wary of the league's long-term viability and were looking for an exit strategy. Citing the WNBA's historically strained relationship with networks over broadcast rights and scheduling conflicts, Clark's injury provided the perfect, publicly defensible excuse to pivot. The fallout for the players is devastating, extending far beyond mere airtime. It's about leverage. As they head into critical CBA negotiations, the players had planned to use the soaring ratings as their primary weapon. Now, without that coverage, their bargaining power has all but evaporated. As the networks shift their focus to more reliable investments, the players' voices, once amplified by the media megaphone, are growing perilously quiet. But while headlines focus on the network retreat, a far more intricate and potentially cynical battle is unfolding behind closed doors. The looming war over the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement. For months, insiders have whispered that team owners were bracing for the most challenging negotiations in the league's history. Caitlin Clark's injury and the subsequent market collapse may have inadvertently handed them all the leverage they need. With the current CBA set to expire, players were poised to make an aggressive push for transformative change. Their demands were clear: higher salaries, guaranteed multi-year contracts, improved travel accommodations, and a greater share of league revenue. Their argument was built on a simple premise. The unprecedented ratings and sold-out arenas, driven by Clark's star power, were undeniable proof of the league's burgeoning value. But with ESPN and Fox stepping back, that entire argument has crumbled. Owners now find themselves in an unexpectedly powerful position. Instead of being pressured to offer groundbreaking contracts, they can point to the tanking ratings, the empty seats, and the dwindling media interest as concrete justification to maintain the status quo. Some within the players' circle believe this is not a coincidence but the result of a calculated if unspoken strategy. The theory, cynical yet familiar in the annals of professional sports, is this: by failing to adequately promote the rest of the league and allowing the hype around Clark to become all-consuming, the owners created a bubble. Now that the bubble has burst, they can use the resulting crisis to their advantage in negotiations. In essence, shrink the pie before you're forced to decide how to split it. This dynamic places immense pressure on the players. For years, WNBA athletes have championed their league, advocating for respect and equal treatment. Yet, the lack of consistent, broad-based fan engagement has always been their Achilles heel. The owners know this. With the networks in retreat, the argument for massive pay increases looks weaker than it has in years. Instead of marching into negotiations from a position of strength, the players are now forced onto the defensive, scrambling to justify their value in a market that appears to have contracted overnight. The threat of a lockout makes this situation even more volatile. If an agreement cannot be reached by the deadline, the 2026 season could be in jeopardy. A work stoppage would be catastrophic for a league fighting for its place in the crowded sports landscape. For the players, the idea of losing a season after finally tasting mainstream relevance is unthinkable. For some owners, however, it might just be part of a larger plan. Push the players into a corner until they are forced to accept terms that heavily favor management. And as this boardroom battle intensifies, the players are also watching their public reputations crumble under a relentless assault from media critics who now see blood in the water.